I've just put my iPod on shuffle, and the first song that's come up is Suffragette City by David Bowie. Suffragette City is a song. It's a damn good song, actually. But what are songs? That might sound like a bit of a weird question. Songs are bits of music, surely. But what I mean is, what sort of thing is Suffragette City? Because it's not like the Mona Lisa, where there's only one of it, and if I ask you where is it, you can point to it and say, there it is. Suffragette City is more like Hamlet or Kill Bill Volume 2, in that it exists in multiple copies in different times and different locations, and different formats. Sometimes it's played live, sometimes it's recorded, sometimes somebody might do a cover version of it, and someone other than David Bowie plays it. Do all of those count as Suffragette City, or only some? And why?
Songs as types.
There are plenty of theories of musical ontology to choose from. The most popular approach right now is musical platonism. Platonists believe that songs exist as abstract objects, spaceless, timeless things. Suffragette City is a type, one of these abstract objects, and any performance of it is a token of that type, a specific instance. Kind of like how the letter A is a type, and this written A is a token of that type. For now, just suppose that that's correct. We still have a few questions, like, what does a song have to be a token of the type Suffragette City? What properties does it have to have? Does an acoustic version still count as Suffragette City? Or if I just hum it... Is that Suffragette City? If David Bowie plays it, but it contains a wrong note, is it still the genuine article? And if Suffragette City exists timelessly, independent of any instance of it, then how did David Bowie, who is a man located within time and space, create it? In fact, if it always existed, he didn't so much create it as discover it, in which case, A, how did he do that? And B, is that a creative act that he deserves artistic credit for?
Songs as sets.
As you can see, if we want to ask questions like what is the artistic value of a song, or does somebody deserve credit for creating it, a lot of those questions orbit around that first metaphysical question. What is the thing that they've supposedly created? The alternative to Platonism is nominalism, or anti-realism. Nominalists don't believe in all of these spooky, spaceless, timeless, abstract objects. I mean, what does it even mean for something to exist outside space and time? Set theorists say that a song like Suffragette City is just every instance of its being played. The name Suffragette City is how we refer to every performance of the song at once. So when David Bowie played the first performance in the set, he gets some artistic credit for that. When I play it on my iPod, that's another performance in the set. It's a little bit like the type-token distinction, only now we've gotten rid of the spaceless, timeless, spooky, weird, abstract objects. We do still have the question of how similar does a performance of the song have to be to count as a member of the set Suffragette City. But then, at least set theory is no worse off in that regard than musical Platonism, which had the similar question. So we're caught between these two kinds of theories, one Platonist one and one anti-realist one. Maybe what I need is a musical expert, and fortunately, I happen to know one.
Hey Ollie! Given that one of my most recent videos was about the phenomena of reflectoporn on eBay, this is going to be a bit of a leap, but I think that I'm ready. One of the things that most interests me here is the idea that David Bowie songs have always existed, and the Thin White Duke is just discovering them and offering up the first token. So often in interviews, you'll hear artists claim that their biggest hits weren't so much written by them as channeled. Lady Gaga says that Alexander McQueen wrote Born This Way through her, and Robert Plant claims that the lyrics to Stairway to Heaven just came out of his hand. As a skeptical dude, I don't think that Satan or God or deceased fashion icons are writing pop music, but I do think it's an interesting anecdotal prism through which to view the concept of types and tokens. Similarly, Ollie asks if David Bowie's own imperfect renditions count as the genuine article. And I found myself wondering this the first time I saw Bob Dylan, who has never been a people-pleasing performer, but these days Dylan distorts his own songs to the point that they're barely recognizable. It certainly keeps him interested, but the audience is left wondering if they're actually hearing It's Alright Ma, I'm Only Bleeding, even though it's halfway through and it's kind of a rockabilly song now. A lot of fans hate this. They pay to hear Dylan sound like the Dylan that they know from the many hours that they've spent with his records. And this strange rockabilly song is not the folk classic they have come to know and love, lo, these many years. But for Dylan, the actual architect of It's Alright Ma, this is much closer to the genuine article. This is a real performance of the song as he now envisions it. Which is ultimately where I personally find myself in this whole debate. If Billy Ray Cyrus wants Achy Breaky Heart to be a country rap song now, which it is, that's BRC's call. It's the same as the Beastie Boys going back and taking out all the misogyny from their old lyrics. Those lyrics that they now have that are not misogynist are now the lyrics. So my answer is both a total cop-out and I think the only way to answer this question. Suffragette City is whatever David Bowie wants it to be today.
Interesting. I quite like the importance that Sam has placed on the artist's intentions there. If the artist can change their song, then that would seem to suggest that it's not a spaceless, timeless, unchangeable abstract object. Maybe we're leaning more towards an anti-realist, nominalist, maybe set theorist position. In which case, we still have that lingering question, how much can Bob Dylan change It's Alright Ma before it's no longer Alright Ma? What do you guys think? What are songs? My thanks to Sam from This Exists for doing this collaboration with me. If you head on over to his channel, he's got a video about the definition of music, which I have a cheeky cameo in. Next time, we could either do the ethics of collateral damage, or we could do a video on Margaret Cavendish, who is a badass philosopher who doesn't get enough credit, I think. And for more philosophical videos from me every Friday, please subscribe. This video was sponsored by Audible.com. If you go to audibletrial.com/philosophytube, you can get a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial of their audiobook service. It's totally easy to cancel, you can do it anytime. And also, every time one of you signs up to it, I get a tiny bit of money, which is very helpful. Speaking of money, before we do the comments from last time, a quick announcement. A while ago I tutored a fan on Skype with their philosophy work, and I was a little bit hesitant at first, but you know what, I actually really enjoyed it. So if you need a tutor, then get in touch with me. I can do hourly tutoring over Skype, or I can look at essays or dissertations for you and provide written feedback. I'm not just going to do your homework for you, but if you need a philosophy tutor and that's something you might be interested in, then by all means get in touch. Last time we talked about pleasure and hedonism, so let's have a look at some comments. George-Andre Gauguin said that if the preference hedonist is correct, and the good life is one filled with pleasure, where pleasure is any mental state that is desired, then what about somebody who desires to do horrible things? What about a serial killer who just desires to murder people? And if they do a lot of murdering, then the preference hedonist must surely admit that they have a good life. Well, that's a criticism that is often levelled at the preference hedonist, and some people have tried to get around it. Personally, I think the only option there is to bite the bullet and say, yeah, you know what, if Hannibal Lecter really wants to kill folks, and he kills a lot of folks, then that might not be a life we would choose, and for moral reasons we might say that's not a life that he should choose, but if you were to ask him, he's gonna tell you that he's having a great day. So as far as he's concerned, he is having a good life. H.G. Jean pointed out another criticism that's often levelled at hedonism, which is that if the hedonist is correct, then what you don't know can't hurt you. If you are spied on and you never find out, or your partner cheats on you, that's the usual example, and you never ever find out, then the preference hedonist must say that you are not any worse off because of that. Again, I think the only option there is to bite the bullet, really, and say, yeah, you know what, if you think you're in a great relationship for 50 years and then you die and it turns out that your partner absolutely hated you and they were cheating on you behind your back the whole time, but you never find out, then from your point of view, I think you've still lived a good life. Now, we then have to answer the question of, well, then why is doing seemingly bad things to people, like cheating on them, if they never find out, why is it bad? And to answer that, we would need to have some kind of moral system where the badness of an action isn't just determined by how much harm it does. We might, for instance, say that cheating is an example of a bad action because it tends to lead to harm, not that it always does. And we'd have to flesh out the details of that, but that would be one way of approaching that problem. H. Cheney took preference hedonism and tried to apply it to animals, saying that if animals would experience more pleasure, mental states that they desire, in captivity than they would in the wild, or in farming conditions than they would in the wild, then that might have interesting ramifications for animal welfare and conservation, and whether or not we think it's right to keep them. And yeah, that's an interesting point. I'm not sure if anyone's actually directly taken preference hedonism and applied it to that scenario, but that's an interesting point. I guess we would have to show, in order for that to fly, that animals are capable of experiencing desires, which, yeah, with some animals, I don't anticipate that would be too difficult. I guess we might also rub up against the question, what is better, a shorter life with more pleasure in it, or a longer life with less pleasure in it? I know which I would choose, or at least which I should choose as a preference hedonist, but not everybody would go with me on that, I feel. Clyde Nerona and Delta X said, what if you desire your own displeasure? The preference hedonist can't explain that, so therefore preference hedonism must be contradictory. Well, not quite. The contradiction there is in the scenario that you've proposed. It's not in preference hedonism itself. According to preference hedonism, pleasure is any mental state that is desired, so nobody could desire displeasure, because that would mean that they both desired and did not desire the same thing, and in a strict logical sense, rather than just in a Freudian, they desire it but they feel guilty and ashamed about desiring it sort of way. It would be a strict logical contradiction. So, I mean, you could desire things that would be physically painful. You could, if you're a masochist, desire that sort of thing, but you couldn't actually desire displeasure on the hedonist definition of pleasure. Sean Ravenfire briefly touched on death. Whether death is a harm is a very, very interesting question, and the preference hedonist sometimes has an unintuitive answer to that question. That's its own episode that we'll have to do another time, but yeah, great comment. Sophia Sun and a few others pointed out that when I talked about second-order desires, I should have credited the philosopher Harry Frankfurt with coming up with them. Yes, you are absolutely right. I knew that I'd heard of them somewhere before when I used them in my arguments, and it's one of those things where you think, did I come up with that, or did someone else come up with that? Because it's been so long since I've read Frankfurt. But yes, you're absolutely right, I should have done that. Thank you very much for bringing me up on it. That's all the time I've got this week. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!